Welcome, Christine. I'm so glad you could be here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to just have a little bit of introduction and background. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey with YWAM Mercy?
Sure. So, yes, again, I'm Christine, and let's see, I started with YWAM Mercy when I was 20. Well, I started with YWAM when I was 29 years old. I was working in a computer company, and I was doing, some mission, mission work on the weekends, and I just started thinking, what do I really want to be doing with my life? And, is this work that I'm doing my calling, or is there something else that God has in mind for me? And one weekend I was down in San Francisco at YWAM, and I had just been feeling like God was going to do something, make some kind of big change in my life. And I felt like it was going to come in September. And so I was talking to one of the staff at the YWAM base down in San Francisco. And she says to me, "Oh, well, our discipleship training school starts in September." And it was kind of like a Holy Spirit, like, this is, this is for you. And so I quit my job and moved to San Francisco and put my car in storage and started learning at the discipleship training school in San Francisco. And we went on an outreach to Thailand and Vietnam. And when I was in Vietnam, really felt like the Lord said, "You're going to come back to this place." So I returned to San Francisco, ended up joining the staff there in San Francisco, working with homeless people in the Tenderloin, and then working with at-risk youth in the Bayview Hunters Point area. And I was living there in the Tenderloin, living there in Bayview Hunters Point, and an opportunity came up to go on another discipleship training school outreach to Vietnam. And so I jumped at the chance and talked with Rosalind, who is the leader of YWAM Mercy Vietnam, and just told her how I had had a heart to come back to Vietnam and the opportunity hadn't come up. And she said, "Well, you've been nurturing that in your heart for a long time. I suggest you just set a date and come." So I went back to San Francisco and told them, what I had felt to do, and set a date, and ended up coming back to Vietnam on a third discipleship training school outreach, and joined the staff of YWAM Mercy Vietnam a couple years later after I spent some time learning the language.
That's cool. What initially drew you to YWAM Mercy and the work that they do now?
Well, I knew I wanted to serve in Vietnam, and I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. And it turned out that I was really drawn to Rosalind as a person, and to the work that she was doing. And kind of the way that I'm made, kind of my personality, is to be a helper, kind of a behind the scenes person that helps someone with a big vision get it all done. And so I just felt that I should join her. And in a short time, I felt like, okay, my role is to be her assistant and just to serve her, to make things run smoother for her. And so that's what I've been doing since, I guess, about, 2008, maybe 2009 or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's been really, really good. I really enjoy it. When I was in San Francisco, what I did was a lot of staff training, and I had met Andy Zimmerman, who is John Dawson's personal assistant, and John Dawson's one of the leaders in YWAM International. And so he had talked to me about, just how he was working with John, making things easier for him. And it just seemed like the kind of thing that I wanted to do, that I was made to do. And so he had just given me this vision of being an assistant to somebody who was carrying a heavy load. And so that's what I wanted to do for Rosalind.
Well, that's cool. So what is your current role with working with Rosalind, and how has it evolved since you started working online?
Right. So I started working with her after I finished language school in Vietnam. I really wanted to give myself at least a year, maybe more, to just learn the language, learn the culture, make friends. Because when you meet people in another country that are speaking natively another language, the relationship that you form with them, the language that you use at that time ends up being the language that you're going to use going forward. So I wanted my Vietnamese to be good enough that I could start forming relationships with people in Vietnamese, and that would be the stronger language. Because if English was always the stronger language between me and my friends, then that's what we'd always be speaking. And I knew that would keep me from being good at speaking Vietnamese. So I did the language school for a while, and then I joined her, and then finally became her assistant, kind of officially. And I lived there in Vietnam for about 5 years. And then when I met my husband, I came back to the States and started working with Rosalind online. So, when I was there, I was spending a lot more time with people directly, going with the staff out to the different locations where we were working, doing projects. But from here, my role is really mostly administrative and just being a support to Rosalind. So I take care of the donors that sponsor children in our 3 children's homes, and all the bookkeeping, because we're getting money in all kinds of different currencies from all kinds of different accounts, receiving that money, keeping track of it, and getting it where it needs to go to pay for projects and things like that, and just editing documents, grants, reports, all that kind of stuff. Anything that takes a lot of time for Rosalind that I can do, so that she speaks a lot internationally and supports YWAM students that are studying community development. So, that's at this time in her life, that's what she really needs to be spending time doing, not, editing documents and bookkeeping and things like that. So I try to take care of all those things so that she has time and space to travel and do the things that she's called to do.
And you described the process of working with sponsors.
Yeah. So we have 3 children's homes. I think there's about 48 children in the homes right now. And we support the children until they finish some kind of tertiary education, so that they can get a job and, thrive and be productive members of society. And, a lot of them get really good jobs and get married, have kids, that kind of thing. So a lot of the sponsors will stay with the child, until they finish all of that education. I'll send them reports, what's going on with the child, updated pictures every year, newsletters, news, kind of like stories about things that are happening with them, the different, like they just went on a big historical tour of Vietnam, all the children from all 3 homes, for about 4 or 5 days. So, I'm putting together a report. Our Vietnamese staff in Vietnam sent me all the best pictures and her notes about everything that they did. And then I'll post that on the internet and send it to all the sponsors to help them to know what the children have been doing and how their support is helping them to do those things.
That is really awesome. You said you put updates on your website. Do you also send individual email, or
Sure.
what are some?
Yeah. Send individual reports a couple of times a year, letters from the children to their sponsors. And so I facilitate all of that back and forth, because of course the children are doing everything in Vietnamese and our house parents are doing everything in Vietnamese. Some of them may know a little bit of English from school, but none of them are very fluent in English. Our project officer that's involved in the homes is fluent in English, so she does all the translation of the letters and things back and forth. But so I'm really the main person that communicates with all of the donors and facilitates the back and forth of all the information between the children and their sponsors.
You said you have three homes. So the kids stay there, and describe that.
Right. So a lot of the children that we take care of aren't necessarily orphans. They may still have a parent, but that parent may have a situation that makes it so that they're unable to care for the child. So it might be something like mental illness or physical illness, something like that. So all of the situations that you can imagine here in the United States might cause a child to be in foster care is usually what causes community leaders to recommend children to the homes that we run. And really, these are community-based children's homes. So it's the local leaders that that asks for the homes to be there, and they're the ones that take responsibility for the homes. It's local people who work as the home parents, and the children are still in their community, so they're still going to their community schools, and they're still in touch with their families or extended families, but they're able to stay in school, to be fed, receive their clothing, medical care, all the things that they need, so that they can develop like the other children would in their villages.
So do all the sponsors come from, where do the sponsors come from? Are there some in Vietnam, or are they all in the US, or are they around the world? Where are the sponsors coming from?
Them are in New Zealand, because that's where Rosalind comes from. There's some in the US, some in Germany, and in other countries. So that's why we receive donations in so many different currencies, because people all over Japan, all different countries, Australia, lots of donors in Australia, because Talk H is a, I guess I want to call it like a nonprofit kind of volunteering club. And the members of Talk H, a lot of them have sponsored children, and the leaders of Talk H in Australia are very, very supportive in sharing about our work with others, and helping us to raise the funds that we need to be able to take care of the children, and to do the other things that we do in Vietnam.
Okay,
So a
that's
lot
interesting.
of sponsors from Australia and New Zealand.
Okay, that's interesting. Can you say something for us in Vietnamese?
Tôi rất thích đi Vietnam. Tôi rất muốn về Vietnam. I said I really like to go to Vietnam, and I would really like to go back to Vietnam.
Okay, that's nice. Are there any challenges that you faced in adapting your work to an online setting, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there. I mean, I suppose working in Vietnam is always a challenge, because you're working in another culture, another country. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and it can be difficult to accomplish almost anything you want to accomplish. So in a lot of ways, working from the US is easier, because I'm not working with that side of the bureaucracy. I'm working with the people, the sponsors, people who are favorable to the work, and want to be involved. And so I'm just kind of handling that side of things. I guess a challenging part of it can just be feeling isolated. I just meet with Rosalind online in the late evening. The time difference is 12 hours between Vietnam and here in Texas. So it's her morning and her early morning, my late evening. We get together and talk, for a couple hours, and push things forward. But other than that, I'm working on my own. And when I was working in Vietnam or in San Francisco, I had a whole staff around me, and, we'd have prayer times together, hearing God together, seeking him for vision in the way that we were going to work together. And so being home, I don't have that benefit. So I get that kind of spiritual support through my church, but it's just different.
Could you share a story of a particular individual or community that you've seen directly impacted by YWAM Mercy's work, either during your time in Vietnam or through your online efforts?
There's two things that I'm thinking of. One is just the many young people who've come up through the homes and now have very good jobs, and are married, have children, are working, and then they come back to the homes whenever they have a big celebration, like they celebrate their birthday, everybody's birthday, on the same day instead of on all the individual birthdays. So they'll come back for their birthday or Lunar New Year celebrations, and contribute and encourage the kids and help them to know that they have a really positive future ahead of them. So I could name a lot of children that have come up through that situation and now have a really good life situation. And so that's super encouraging, because that's what we wanted, was to help them to come out of a very difficult situation and have a better future. And then another situation, another thing that's encouraging to me is just the different communities that we've worked in. We do a lot of what we call integrated rural development, which is just bringing a lot of different interventions that help communities to develop, help them to increase incomes so that the people in the community aren't in poverty. So it can be simple things like getting a cow, because animal raising pretty much brings people out of poverty very quickly. Or it could be teaching them about business principles. So after we do a project, we go in and evaluate what the impact has been. And so to see communities where a huge amount of people were in poverty and now there's not that many people in poverty, and you can trace it back to work that we've done, is, you know, really encouraging. So we always are trying to work with the poorest of the poor. You know, Vietnam has developed a ton in the last decade, and it's really becoming like a middle income country, but it's very uneven, and there's still lots of pockets of poverty in the more isolated areas. And so that's where we want to be working.
Okay. So you said you were in Vietnam until you met your husband and got married, and he's the pastor of our church, Grace Communion Richardson,
Yep.
and it's a community church. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah. I mean, that's what one of the things I love the best about our church is that we really want to be reaching out and impacting our community. So like I want to be reaching out and impacting the community in Vietnam. I want to be doing the same thing here in Richardson. So, I mean, one thing that's really personal to me is we've opened an American Heritage Girls Troop. And so my daughter and I used to be attending a troop in another community. And so service projects, you know, anything that we were doing was affecting another community. And so we opened an American Heritage Girls Troop here. And so now, you know, we march in the Christmas parade, and we work at the animal shelter, and, you know, we do our projects to impact the community right here in Richardson. So the American Heritage Girls Troop is a vehicle for that. Or you know, we have coming up a day to bless the children, where, you know, we pray over the children for the coming school year. And so instead of doing that in our church, we're going to do that in the park. So, you know, we're trying to make ourselves available to the community to see what the needs are, and to, you know, take appropriate steps to address those, and just say, hey, we're here, we want to serve you, we're here for your spiritual needs, we're, you know, we care about our community and we want to be a part of it.
And this past summer, we put on a summer camp, skills development camp.
Yes, right.
You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I should have thought about that. That was a big one. So when my husband was looking at the church and, you know, what are the skills and talents, camping and scouting really stuck out, because a lot of people had been involved in that when their children were young. And, you know, we're involved with our own daughter. And a lot of people have a lot of skills that kids can benefit from. And it's a really big need right now for kids to learn life skills. And I think parents are becoming more aware that the children need to learn, you know, to do things, not just academics. They need to know how to do different skills. So we put together a camp. It's just for a couple days, and invited children from the community and also from a couple of different American Heritage Girls and Trail Life troops, and just offered them to learn different life skills. So like graphic design or cooking or gardening. And so the adults and teenagers that came to teach those skills, you know, something they were interested in, something they were passionate about, and they, you know, shared that with these kids that were between 6 and 12. And so, yeah, it was super fun. The kids really loved it, and they wanted to do it again. They said, can we do it again? And can we do it for more days? So next year we'll be doing 3 days. Last year we did 2 days, and, you know, continue to learn and improve and increase, and you know, figure out how to invite those kids in the community that would really most benefit from being involved in something like that.
It's a lot of fun. So what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned from your experiences with YWAM Mercy, both abroad and in your current role?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was just back it actually goes all the way back to my discipleship training school and my time in San Francisco, ministering to people and to being on outreach in Thailand and Vietnam. And, anytime you're working with people, people have needs. And I learned really early on that I can respond to needs as the Holy Spirit makes me aware, but I'm not responsible for other people's needs. And that was a huge one to learn because, at first I was just, the weight was so heavy. And I remember a friend coming to visit me in San Francisco, and, we lived right in the Tenderloin. Our ministry location was right in the Tenderloin. And so there's, homeless people with tremendous needs all around you as you walk in and out of the neighborhood. And she came and she was just so heavy. And she said, "How can you be here and all these needs around?" And I just said, look, I just respond to the needs that the Holy Spirit shows me to respond to. And I have to trust that God is taking care of the rest of those needs. And, it's the same thing in Thailand or in Vietnam. Is there's a lot of physical needs, spiritual needs. And I can bring all of those to the Lord and ask him which ones are the ones for me to respond to and how should I respond to them. And that, gives me a lot of peace.
Well, that's very good. So who or what inspires you to continue this impactful work day in and day out?
The Lord, of course. Yeah. I mean, I think people who work in community development, people who work serving others often say that they get a lot more out of it than the people. Maybe they get a lot out of it. They're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to give so much," or others from the outside looking in and say, "Oh, you give so much." But I'm always really inspired by the things that the Lord does. And I feel like it's a huge privilege to be there in the middle of it as he does things. And so that keeps me going. In American Heritage Girls, we're building women of integrity. And when I see the girls want to become women of integrity and I see those signs, when I see the kids in the children's homes growing into self-sufficient adults that are contributing to the community, you see those things and it's like, I got to be a part of this. It's so encouraging. When I see my boss, Rosalind, being able to go somewhere and speak and just know that she's inspiring the next generation of community developers, it's incredibly rewarding. So that's what keeps me going. And then the relationships, the getting to work with you, getting to work with Rosalind, getting to work with people that I enjoy, that have similar goals, getting to work with my husband to see the Lord do things. That's what keeps me going.
Okay. So for those who are watching who might be interested in supporting YWAM Mercy's mission, how can they get involved or contribute?
Sure. The two biggest needs that we always have, one is for sponsors for the children in the children's homes. We always have 8 or 10 kids that don't have sponsors. And so that's always the big one. And you can go on the website at YWAMMercyVietnam.org, and on the donate page, it lists all the different needs that we have and the different ways that you can donate to sponsor a child. And then the second, so that's like a $50 a month, $100 a month, $150 a month, depending on which child you sponsor in their situation. But the other one that's always needed is for educational, what we call education assistance, which is basically providing school supplies so that children can stay in school. Because in Vietnam, if you don't have the supplies that you need, you can't send your child to school. So if they don't have workbooks, pencils, backpacks, uniforms, they may miss out on being able to attend school. And we're talking about elementary school children here. So, for $25, you can help a child or $20 US, $25 New Zealand or Australian, you can help a child to stay in school for another year. And so that's a really rewarding way to have a really direct impact on a child's life. So, and that also is on our website to be able to donate for that.
Okay. What advice would you give to individuals who are passionate about making a positive impact, but may not know where to start?
Yeah. In YWAM, when there's a young person that's, spent time developing their relationship with God, and now they want to do something to respond to what he's done for them. I always say, find someone who's laboring under a heavy load and help them. So I'm sure anybody can find an organization that's, working hard and needs some assistance, a person that's working in an organization that's working hard and needs some assistance. And I think it makes a huge difference. And doing that, people often find their calling. They find something that's some way of working or some cause, something that will really sustain them for the future.
Okay. So looking ahead, what are your hopes and aspirations for the future of your work with YWAM Mercy? And how do you see the organization evolving over the coming years?
Yeah. So my boss, Rosalind, is nearing retirement age. And like I mentioned, Vietnam is becoming more of a middle income country. And so it's really our goal to pass all of the work on to local people. We've spun off 2 organizations already. One is a business consulting organization called Smart Business Solutions, and another one is called, oh my gosh, the name just went out of my mind, but it doesn't matter. It's a social business doing community development work. So SSCD. And so the last part of it that we're working to localize is the children's homes. And so over the next couple of years, that's really our goal, is to put the children's homes management and all the operation of it into local hands. And then, Rosalind will step back and take a more consultative role, and we'll see what my role will look like at that point. So yeah, so my heart is really to help that happen well, to finish well, and to continue to support Rosalind as long as she needs support for the work that she's doing. So that's what really I feel called to.
That is very inspiring. That is just exciting to hear that. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? Any message you'd like to convey about the importance of compassion and community efforts?
I think that there's a lot of joy in being outward focused. And, sometimes serving ourselves, worrying so much about ourselves can be very discouraging. And looking out and seeing who needs help, whose life can I be a part of, and just doing that and expecting nothing in return is really rewarding. So I would just encourage that. I remember in youth group somebody said, if I'm worrying about myself, one person is worrying about myself, but if I'm worrying about everybody in youth group and they're all worrying about me, I've got like 20 people worrying about me. So yeah, so I would just say there's so much loneliness, and it's just not necessary. Find an organization, find a church, find a nonprofit, get involved in serving others, and there's so much joy in that.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Christine. This has been very enlightening, and I really appreciate your willingness to be here and to share all this information with my listeners.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.